Suma is a genius young man who lives with his grandfather in Japan. He's very kind in nature. He's been studying to crack the civil service exam for a long time, often found buried in books at the library or spending quiet time with his grandfather. Though he doesn't have many friends, doesn't party, and has no girlfriend, he seems happy with his simple life. One day, while reaching for a book in the library, a bright light suddenly appears above him. Confused, he's sucked into it, and the next thing he knows, he's falling from the sky into a strange land. He panics, thinking he'll die, but lands safely, only to find himself surrounded by hooded figures staring at him. Scared but trying to act brave, he bluffs confidence. They escort him to what seems like a courtroom, filled with people in old-fashioned uniforms, some not entirely human. The king welcomes him as the hero, thanking him for answering the summoning. Suma is baffled. He never agreed to anything, and gets angry, saying he was yanked here against his will. The king apologizes and explains that this is a world of magic, dragons, elves, and demons. A void had opened in the north, unleashing hordes of demons that keep coming endlessly. Despite their efforts, the kingdoms can't hold out much longer, and their manpower is dwindling. Suma flatly refuses to fight. Embarrassed, a minister explains that the powerful Chaos Empire is demanding money from them, threatening war if unpaid. Since they have no funds, they summoned a hero to give to the Empire instead. Suma is horrified, realizing he's meant to be a human offering. He demands to know what happens to him once handed over. Will he be safe or killed? No one can answer. He decides he can't leave his fate to chance. When asked when the last hero was summoned, the minister replies it was 500 years ago. Suma points out they can't keep summoning heroes endlessly, so handing him over won't stop the demands. Realizing this is his chance, he declares he will help save the kingdom as the hero. Everyone is shocked, but he says he'll sort the kingdom's finances and fix things. The king, hopeful, agrees. For 3 days and nights, Suma reviews financial records with the ministers and finally comes up with some solutions. In front of a massive crowd, the king announces that he's handing over the throne to Suma, claiming he's more fit to rule. Suma is stunned, but even more shocked when the king declares his daughter Lycia will marry him. Suddenly, Suma's life is flipped. He's king and engaged. He immediately gets to work, buried in mountains of paperwork. Lycia barges in wearing a military uniform, surprising him. Without looking up, he asks if she can read and write. She indignantly says yes. He quizzes her on math, which she answers correctly, and then hands her some paperwork. She reveals she's the former king's daughter, and asks what happened. Suma explains how he was summoned and tricked, and only took over to avoid being sent to the Chaos Empire. He assures her he doesn't want the throne and plans to stay just long enough to stabilize things. She's impressed by his honesty. He tells her he's sold off useless jewels, not national treasures or magic items, to raise money for food. Lycia is horrified at first, but calms down when he shows her a list of what was sold. He says he won't send money to the Chaos Empire while their people starve. Lycia suggests using the money to strengthen their military instead, which Suma agrees makes sense. Slowly, he starts understanding how this world works. He explores the kingdom and realizes they use hidden forms of magic for basic needs, like light and water. A priest takes him to a statue to test for magic affinity. Suma touches it, sees glowing lights in the dark, and learns he does have magical power. Back in his chamber, he experiments and creates a spell to split his consciousness into 3 pens that work on paperwork by themselves. When Lycia sees this, she's shocked, but Suma casually says he just invented the magic. She's amazed, but he piles more paperwork on her before she can ask more. They all work long hours until everyone falls asleep from exhaustion. Suma sees Lycia sleeping on the couch, walks over, and gently brushes her hair aside. Lycia wakes up instantly and asks what he's doing. He awkwardly says he was just checking if she was asleep. The next morning, he takes her for a ride. She's surprised when he sits behind her on the horse, holding her tightly since he doesn't know how to ride. They ride to a vast white field, and he shows her it's all cotton. He explains that farmers switched to cotton to export it for profit, but when other countries did the same, prices crashed. Now their country grows too much cotton and barely any food. That's why the kingdom is starving. Lisha feels guilty for not knowing this and apologizes. Suma tells her not to say sorry, just help him fix it. Later, during breakfast, the guard leader Ludwin introduces himself and asks how he can help. Suma bluntly says most people are useless, and he needs trained specialists. Ludwin promises to try. During tea, Suma asks Lisha if they have any kind of broadcasting device. She mentions a public announcement tool, which is perfect for his idea. He explains he wants to recruit talent from the general population. She says they already do that through written exams. He tells her that's inefficient and excludes capable people, especially since only 30% are literate. He accuses the system of favoring nobles and being full of nepotism. Lisha is shocked and asks what he plans to do. He tells her to wait and see. The next day, he broadcasts across the kingdom, announcing that anyone with special skills, talent, or knowledge, regardless of background, can come forward. Literacy, wealth, and nobility don't matter. Skill and aptitude do. The court fills up the next day with people responding to the call. Suma sits on his throne with Licia by his side as the selection begins. He notices that only 5 people have nominated themselves for the selection exam. All of them bow in front of him, as soon as Ludwin introduces the king. Except for a tall, dark-skinned girl called Aisha. She claims that she is from the clan of warrior elves, and that they don't bow to anyone to whom they haven't pledged their lives. Ludwin gets mad and tells her to bow down immediately, but Suma stops him and tells him to let it go. He quickly uses his special magic to remotely read everything about these elves and realizes that they are very well known and feared for their combat prowess and are supposed to be excellent warriors. She tells him that she is one of the best warriors in her clan, making her one of the best, if not the best, warriors in the entire kingdom. She then asks Suma whether he could help her. He is taken aback and doesn't know what to say, but the elf continues, telling him that for some reason the blessed forest where they live has been deteriorating at a very rapid rate for no reason. According to her, she and her clansmen take very good care of the forest, but even then it seems to be dying on them and they have no idea why it is happening. She also adds that she has heard that Suma is a very intellectual person and might be able to devise a strategy to save the forest. Suma looks confused but quickly starts thinking and asks whether they are thinning the forest or not. Aisha looks at him blankly and asks what he means by that. Suma realizes that these techniques must be comparatively modern and explains to her that when a forest is left to grow on its own, oftentimes the older trees end up covering all of the canopy, resulting in no sunlight penetrating to the forest floor, because of which no seedlings or saplings are able to grow. The entire forest floor dies, and there are no young plants to replace any older trees that might fall. This also leaves the area as a whole susceptible to erosion and other massive natural problems. Suddenly, Aisha completely bows down in front of him and tells him that she is pledging her entire life to Suma and is ready to fight for him and die for him. She asks him to please accept her as his bodyguard and to help them restore the forest. Suma graciously accepts her. The next girl that comes up for trial turns out to be a beautiful maid called Juna. She is supposed to be one of the most beautiful people in the kingdom and is said to be the best singer that ever existed. According to the minister, Juna has descended from a long line of mermaids who used to be extremely beautiful and used to wreck ships by swaying sailors in the wrong direction when they followed their beautiful voices. Suma realizes that if this is true, then singing should be in her blood. He calls her forth and asks her to sing a song for everyone, as it is being broadcast around the kingdom. She looks up at him and tells him that she has no problem doing that, but most of her songs are sad and melancholic. Suma asks her whether she could learn a song by heart after just listening to it once, and she says yes. Suma quickly flicks out his phone and gives her an earphone to hear one of the songs he has on it. She seems to like the song and it passes the vibe check. She returns the earphones to Suma, and everyone seems surprised by the new device that Suma just whipped out of his pants. She then gets ready and starts singing the song very beautifully. After the performance is over, everyone applauds her excellent singing. Suma tells her that he is really impressed by her ability to remember his song by heart after hearing it once and singing it perfectly. The next person to come forward is a fat idiot named Poncho. He seems very nervous and is sweating like a pig, which reminds Suma of himself when he first saw his beautiful girlfriend. He gets up and tries to address the king, but falls after tripping over his own leg like an idiot. He then gets up and explains that his special ability is that he is a glutton, and has tried almost every dish that this country has to offer. He expected Suma to laugh in his face, but surprisingly enough, Suma rushes down to shake his hand and tells him that he was waiting for Suma like him to come along, and is really happy to hire him. He tells Poncho that at a time when the entire kingdom is suffering through famines, abilities like his are of great importance. This really boosts Poncho's confidence, and he starts crying, saying that all of his life he has been called a fatso, which, to be fair, he is. Suma, however, thinks differently, and tells him that he is the one who will be responsible for bringing their country out of famine and back to prosperity. The next candidate turns out to be an emo guy, who walks up to Suma and introduces himself as Hakuya. He tells Suma that all the while Suma was judging the others, he had been judging him. He is supposed to be one of the best minds in the kingdom, and is a fanatic about reading every kind of literature he can get his hands on. He's a very knowledgeable person, which Suma immediately realizes from the way he talks. He asks Hakuya what his decision was, and whether he thinks Suma is worthy of being king or not. Hakuya replies coolly that it all came down to one decision that Suma made, whether he thought Fatty was useless or not. If he thought Fatty was useless, he wouldn't have failed to be a worthy king, as he doesn't know what his kingdom needs most right now. But surprisingly, he was extremely enthusiastic after Fatty's appearance. This made him believe that Suma actually had some brains, and wasn't just another nobody. In fact, Hakuya was so impressed that he asked Suma to be his lieutenant, and let him be his right-hand man and advisor. Suma is impressed by Hakuya's decision-making abilities and decides to hire him as his advisor. The last person to come forth is a lily called Tomoe. She is a wolf girl who is supposed to be able to talk to all the animals of every race. She seems very nervous and is hardly speaking for herself. Lucia comments that the members of the wolf clan are never seen inside their kingdom, to which Suma replies that she could be a refugee. He asks her to speak up, but she doesn't, and gets even more scared. Someone decides to descend his throne and walks up to her, crouching down in front of her, and asks what is wrong. She whispers in his ear that something bad is happening, and says something that makes Suma's eyes go wide with shock. Suma quickly regains himself and acts like nothing has happened. He gets up and starts walking back to his throne, telling them that they are all dismissed for now, but that he would like to see the lowly in his chambers. Tomoe, Lise, Ludwin, Suma, and the minister all gather around in Suma's chamber, while Tomoe is sitting on a couch. Suma asks the rest if they heard what Tomoe told him in his ear, but all of them shake their heads, claiming it was barely a whisper and no one could hear what she actually said. Suma lets out a sigh of relief, knowing that no one else in the kingdom heard it, as it was being broadcast all over. He tells the rest that what he's going to tell them must be kept a secret from anyone at all costs, as it might shake the entire kingdom. He finally discloses that Tomoe told him she can not only speak to animals, but is also able to speak to demons. Licia is totally shocked and tells Suma that it must be some kind of mistake, as demons speak a language that is very different from any of the languages that any of the other races speak, and there is no person alive who is able to decipher their language apart from their own guild. Suma looks at her and tells her that that is the reason why Tomoe is probably one of the most important people in the entire country, more so than him. Licia asks Tomoe when she learned that she could talk to the demon race, and she replies that some time ago when she was in the forest, she was just roaming around having fun when she suddenly heard some weird noises and went to investigate. to her horror, she spotted a person from the demon race who was short in height and had the head of a dog looking at her. She started screaming for help when the demon told her to shut up in his own language, which she understood, and she stopped screaming, scared of him. The demon was surprised by this and asked her whether she could understand what he was saying, and she replied yes. Suddenly, they hear a bunch of noises coming, and the demon tells her to run away, as if the rest saw her, they would kill her. That was the last time she saw him, as she ran away from the situation. Licia looks at Suma and asks him whether he is planning some sort of compromise between humans and demons, as that is borderline impossible, since they have killed countless humans. In retort, Suma tells her that humans have killed countless demons. He suggests that there is a possibility that this entire war is just a big misunderstanding caused by the fact that none of the parties can understand each other at all. Licia thinks for a bit and realizes that he might be right. He tells Ludwin that Tomo must be given royal-level security immediately, and that he must make sure she is kept safe. The minister, however, tells them that this will only bring more attention to her, as it would be very weird for a poor girl like Tomo to have royal guards protecting her at every turn. Suma thinks about it, realizes that he is right, and starts thinking about what could be done. The minister suggests that he could adopt Tomoe as his daughter, and that should solve the problem, but then realizes that he has to marry Suma before he can adopt her. So Suma suggests Licia's father adopt Tomoe, which will make it normal for her to have royal protection at all times. Tomoe, however, looks at them and interrupts, telling them that she already has a family who is living in the refugee camp, and she is not leaving them. Suma smiles at her and tells her that obviously when she's adopted, Tomoe's parents will become relatives to the king and will start living here at the castle alongside her. She lets out a yelp of joy and thanks them for everything they have been doing for her. Later, while Suma was chilling around in Licia's room, it was brought to his attention that Pancho was back from his quest, and he immediately went to meet him alongside Licia. They all sit down and Pancho thanks them so much for letting him use the royal wyvern, which made it very easy and fast to collect everything he wanted. He quickly arranges a meeting with everyone and decides to go for a kingdom-wide broadcast. Everyone seems to be watching them, as Juna greets the viewers heartily, telling them that they have a special program for them. Pancho is super nervous and fumbling with his words, but Juna reassures him, telling him that even though she was like this in front of an audience when she started, slowly it became better. Pancho feels good about himself and slowly gets in the groove before introducing Suma himself. Suma bows down and apologizes to the people in his kingdom, saying that he's really sorry that they are all still suffering, as he still hasn't fixed the problem of food shortage. He tells them that he has been rigorously working to solve the issue. Meanwhile, he has sent Pancho, an excellent food expert, to search for alternative foods that can be cooked in a particular manner to make them edible and extremely tasty. He tells them that he will show them how to cook these food items himself and has selected 3 members of his team, Licia, Tomo, and Aisha, who will taste test each of the dishes. After that, Suma tells Pancho to reveal the first dish, and Pancho brings a saucepan that contains an octopus. All 3 of the taste testers immediately go back to their chairs, disgusted by the octopus. Suma, however, grabs the octopus, kills it, and starts to clean its internal organs, disgusting the girls even more. He then takes the entire octopus and boils it in water before taking it out, slicing it into small pieces, breading it, and frying it. After putting it on skewers, slowly the issue seems to be getting interesting, as the smell seems pretty good. He takes the fried octopus out of the fryer and presents it in front of the girls, who look at it apprehensively. Aisha ends up taking the first bite and is shocked at how tender it is. Watching her gave the other girls some confidence, and they also try it, totally shocked by how amazing it tasted. They all start eating one after the other, praising Suma's cooking. Juna seems happy that they liked it, and reveals that it is a very common dish in her homeland, and she eats it pretty often when she visits. She then asks permission from Suma to try the dish, as it looks amazing, and he obviously gives her the green signal. Within a matter of minutes, all the food on the table disappears as they finish up everything. The next dish that Pancho reveals turns out to be some tree roots. Everyone again seems to be very skeptical about the dish, but Aisha claims that it is a very common food item in the forest, as they have to make do with whatever the forest provides. Suma cuts the roots into small pieces, puts a bit of sugar and salt in them, and serves them. They all take a bite and are immediately impressed by how delicious it tastes and how it could be a really good snack item. The third item turns out to be fried locusts, which shocks everyone, including Suma. Surprisingly, however, Tomoe starts eating it happily and claims that there is a certain smell that is very endearing to her and reminds her of her homeland. Suma also takes a bite and immediately realizes that the taste he just experienced seems very similar to miso and soy sauce. This makes him extremely happy, as ever since he came to this world, he hasn't been able to have authentic Japanese food at all. The next dish that Poncho brings forth horrifies every single one of them. It turns out to be a slime monster. It all seemed disgusted, but Poncho wears an apron and starts rolling out the slime flat on the countertop and cutting them into small noodle-like slices before he boils them in water alongside salt and adds a couple of vegetables and some stock. The finished product seems unappetizing to the rest of them, but Suma comments that the dish looks like Raymond from his world and sits down to eat. He takes a bite and is pleasantly surprised to know that it even tastes like ramen and starts slurping noisily. Slowly, the rest of them also try it and start enjoying it. Finally, their broadcast ends with that, and it turns out to be wildly successful, as soon every single eatery in the area starts serving all the meals that they showcased, and soon they also start mixing things together to create new and exciting meals. He gets called to the throne room by one of the guards, who tells him that the Prime Minister is insisting on an audience with the king. So Suma goes inside the courtroom and finds Hakuya and the Prime Minister both bowing down in front of him. He tells them to get up and speak their minds. The Prime Minister tells him that he feels he should follow the former king's example and step down from his post to give new blood a chance to shine and make the situation better by dealing with them with new techniques instead of following the old school method, as it doesn't seem to be working. Suma seems very surprised at this sudden resignation and asks him about his successor, as they need a prime minister who is as smart as him and as wise. The minister, however, tells Suma not to worry, as he had taken Hakuya as his apprentice and believes that he is ready to take the post of prime minister and can do excellent work in the future. So Hakuya was standing there and realizes that he might very well be the perfect candidate for the job. He accepts the minister's resignation and appoints Hakuya as the new prime minister. Hakuya looks up at Suma and thanks him before telling him to take the entire day off, as he has been working non-stop, and if he keeps working like this, he will get burnt out, leading to a decline of productivity in those around him. At first, Suma seems reluctant to take the day off, as he believes there is a lot of work to be done. But Hakuya tells him that he needs to take the day off no matter what, and he can do the rest of the work the next day. Suma decides to follow his advice and arranges a date with Lycia, with Aisha escorting them. Lycia at first seems shocked that Suma is taking it off and asks him whether he's okay. Suma tells her that everything is fine, and then he just wants to relax for an evening. This tells him that they shouldn't go out as the king and queen. She rips out a bunch of military school uniforms and hands them over to him while wearing one herself. They get Aisha as protection and then go inside the city. After roaming for a while, they decide to pay Juna a visit at her cafe and sit down in a booth, have some relaxing snacks while relaxing on their seats and talking about the kingdom. They overhear a pretty loud conversation coming from the adjoining table, which is occupied by a fox girl and a red-haired guy. They seem to be having a heated argument, and they are so loud that Suma can't help but overhear their entire conversation. The fox girl's name is Ki, and the guy is called Hal. They start talking again, and Hal tells Ki that he doesn't trust the new king at all, as he himself seems to be a very young and inexperienced person, so why she follows Suma, who is around his age and probably has less experience on the battlefield. Ki, however, tells him to shut up, and tells him that the new king seems to be a formidable person in terms of intelligence and strategy, and is doing really good work. Hal seems to have young blood and only wants to prove himself in a battle and earn the respect of his peers. He tells her that he plans to go over to the Duke of Carmen and join his army. Ki seems horrified and tells him to never say that again, as the Duke of Carmen is an open rebellion against the new king for no reason. Hal, however, shouts at her that he will do as he pleases, and he doesn't believe the new king is fit to be anything. At that point, Suma walks over to their table and asks Hal straight up why he doesn't like the new king. Hal looks up at him and asks who the hell he is, but he seems to recognize Suma as soon as she sees him, and gets very flustered. They all sit down at a different table and start talking again. Hal again tries to get in Suma's face, asking him who he thinks he is, but Aisha immediately grabs his hand, twisting it before grabbing his face in her palms and crushing it. Suma tells her to let him go, as that should be enough. Hal looks at him, scared he will get hurt. Suma then decides to quit playing, and looks at Hal before asking him whether he still doesn't recognize him. Hal immediately realizes that Suma is the king himself, and quickly the tone of his voice changes. Suma asks him why he wants to go over to the Duke of Carmen, but Hal doesn't say anything out of fear. Someone looks at him and tells him that he will not tell Hal to stay with him, and he can and should do as he pleases. If he wants to go over to the Duke of Carmen, he should definitely do so, because you can't force anyone to follow you as they do so themselves. Suma, however, plays a mental game with him, as he understands the underlying feelings of both Hal and Ki. He tells him that he needs to understand that once he is on the opposite side, he will have to fight against Ki, and if he decides to avoid coming into a head-to-head battle with her, Suma else will, and if she gets injured, he will not be allowed by his army to protect her, even if she is dying and could be saved. He will not be allowed by his army to do so, and they will consider it treason. Hal goes into silent thinking mode and thinks long and hard about it before deciding that he doesn't want to go on the opposite side and fight against Suma or Ki. Suma is glad to know that and thanks him before taking his leave. The next day, he sits down with Licia for tea and explains to her that he's getting good with his dark magic and can now control 4 inanimate objects alone. Before she could say anything, however, he was called to the courtroom because the head of the prestigious Magna House had come to meet him and request his attendance. Suma immediately goes over to meet with them and finds Hal, who seems to have gotten many injuries on his face. Glaive and Ki all present there, bowing their heads down on the throne, and Glaive immediately starts apologizing to Suma, telling him that he had no idea that Hal said all the things that he said and was only informed by Ki later. He tells Suma that he has disciplined his son and requests that he not take very strict actions against him. He promises that Suma has the unwavering support of the Magna family and they will always stand beside him in all circumstances. Suma thanks him for his loyalty and tells him that he doesn't intend to punish Hal, as it seems like Glaive has punished him enough. He tells Glaive that he's going to take Ki in as one of the mages in his royal guard and also make Hal an officer in his royal army so they can stay close and support each other. Several days later, finally the bulk of the paperwork has been completed, and the remaining paperwork can be done by using Suma's dark magic, so they shouldn't need any more manpower. Now he calls in a meeting with everyone who has been working with paperwork for the entire duration. Once they assemble, he gives them a magnanimous speech about how they are the real treasure of the kingdom, and just because of them he can start working on the next project, which can ensure the long-term survival of the entire kingdom and can even result in the food shortage problem being solved. He tells them to take an entire week off for their amazing work. He tells them that he would have paid them extra money for everything that they did, but the kingdom is short on money right now, so instead he tells them to go to the royal wine cellar, which holds the most amazing and deeply flavored vintage wine. He tells them that they can take an entire bottle each for themselves and do whatever they want with it. They can sell it or drink it. It's up to them. The entire group of men rejoices at this, thanks so much for their generosity, and rushes off to the wine cellar. Licia asks him whether it was advisable for him to give them a week off from work, as they still have a bunch of things to take care of. Suma tells her to chill out for a bit as the work is going at a great pace. He tells her that he plans to create a port on the shore of one of the villages, which will be a very strategic destination to boost trade in the kingdom and create a trading town in the place where the village was, giving employment to a bunch of people. He tells her that ships from any other country will have to pay taxes and tolls in order to trade in their kingdom, and this will reduce the amount of illegal trade done beneath their noses. Apart from that, he will put low taxes on any ship that has arrived at the port to trade food crops at low prices, which will reduce the problem of food shortages in the country. He explains to her that everything depends on supply and demand, and right now the demand for food crops is at its highest, whereas the supply is down to zero. The next day, Suma, Lisha, and Aisha go to the small village where the construction has to be done. Ludwin is already there and has set up tents for everyone. He welcomes Suma, and when he asks whether there have been any issues with the construction, Ludwin replies that many of the village elders are strongly advising against building a port on the shore of their village at any cost. When he asks for the reason for this disagreement, Ludwin replies that the elders believe in a very old legend that says that if anything is built in that area, the water gods will destroy the entire region by sending a giant monster made of water that swallows everything. Suma seems interested and asks Ludwin to take him to the elders, who said that. Ludwin takes him to one of the houses where Suma meets up with one of the elders, and they sit down to talk. The elder again advises Suma that if he builds his port over there, the water gods will definitely take their revenge and destroy the entire region. Suma asks him when the water gods destroyed anything, and how they knew it was coming. When his grandfather used to live here, according to the legend, just before the sea monster arrives, the ground starts shaking from its footsteps, and after a while the monster arrives from the sea and gulps down anything in its way, destroying everything that they hold dear. Suma thinks about it, decides to call it a day, and heads back to his castle. He calls Hakuya and Ludwin into his chambers, where they discuss this predicament. Hakuya looks at Suma and asks him whether he believes in the myth. But Suma replies that obviously he doesn't believe in a sea monster, but what he believes in is that myths are always grounded in some truth. He tells them that he has decided to change the place for construction, and that he will be marking out the entire area which the villagers believe is cursed. Hakuya cannot believe his ears, and asks him whether he is afraid of some mythical sea god. Suma replies that he is obviously not worried about a sea god, but he believes that what people are calling a sea monster is a tsunami, and when they say they feel the earth rattle from his footsteps, they are misunderstanding it as it must be an earthquake. He believes that the area must be very susceptible to tsunami after an earthquake, and decides to think ahead and not create a port that is very disaster-prone. If you enjoyed this recap, make sure to check out the next one on your screen, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Goodbye.